He left his safe wide open, not with money, but with secrets that could shatter lives. When his maid walked in, she uncovered a name tied to her husband's mysterious death. What began as a simple test of honesty spiraled into a fight for truth, justice, and survival, one that Keanu Reeves never saw coming. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The morning air in Los Angeles carried the crisp coolness of a late spring dawn. Keanu Reeves stood in the doorway of his study, staring at the heavy steel safe tucked into the corner behind his desk. It had always been a symbol of protection, a quiet place where he stored not just valuables, but fragments of his life that mattered more than wealth. Inside were journals, filled with private reflections, photographs of loved ones gone too soon, legal papers that tied together the responsibilities of his career, and a modest envelope of cash he kept for emergencies. It was not the kind of safe people imagined a celebrity would own. There were no gold bars, no jewelry glittering under spotlights, no stacks of untraceable bills. To Keanu, it was never about riches. It was about memory, about legacy, about safeguarding the fragile threads of the past. That morning, however, he felt the weight of doubt pressing against his chest. For years, friends and colleagues had told him the same thing. He trusted people too easily. They warned him that no matter how kind and genuine he was, not everyone who walked into his life would carry that same honesty. Some would take advantage, and one day, it might cost him dearly. He always brushed those warnings aside. He had lived his entire adult life believing in the better side of humanity, offering second chances even when the world told him not to. But now, something inside urged him to test those beliefs. The thought felt wrong from the very beginning. To set a trap for someone who had done nothing but serve faithfully? To question the integrity of Maria Alvarez, the woman who had walked into his home 5 years ago looking for steady work? She was not just a maid. She was a presence in his home. Steady and reliable. She spoke softly, carried herself with dignity, and treated his belongings with the utmost care. Over time, Keanu had come to rely on her presence, not only for the neatness of his house, but for the calm order she brought into it. She had shared stories of her daughter, of the small garden she kept behind her rented apartment, of the husband she had lost back in Mexico. She had never once asked him for anything beyond her pay. Still, the warnings echoed in his mind. If he was too trusting, he might never see betrayal coming until it was too late. That morning, as sunlight spilled across the study, he made the choice. He pulled the heavy steel door of the safe wide open and left everything exposed inside. The journals lay in uneven stacks. The envelope of cash rested in plain sight. The folder of documents, some bearing old case files and legal stamps, sat on the top shelf. He hesitated before leaving, his hand brushing against the cool steel. For a moment, he considered closing it, locking it, and abandoning the idea altogether. But the voice of caution overpowered his reluctance. Keanu set up the hidden camera discreetly, placing it at an angle that would capture the entire office and the open safe. He didn't do it with arrogance or cruelty. He did it with a reluctant heaviness, almost apologizing in his heart for even suspecting Maria. He told himself this wasn't about catching her in the act, but about confirming what he already believed, that she was as honest as she had always appeared to be. Perhaps then he could silence the doubts of others and prove that trust was not a weakness, but a strength. Before Maria arrived, he rehearsed the plan. He would tell her he had to leave early for a brief trip. He would step out, drive away, and let the day unfold without his presence. She would walk into the study, see the open safe, and in that moment reveal whether temptation had power over her. It felt wrong, and yet, he continued. Standing at the front door with his car keys in hand, he heard Maria's footsteps approach outside. Punctual as always, he called out to her through the open door, offering a polite smile. "Morning, Maria. I've got to step out for a while today, maybe even overnight. Everything should be straightforward. I'll see you tomorrow." She nodded, as she always did, with a gentle smile and a respectful tone. "Of course, Mr. Reeves. Don't worry, I'll take care of things." Keanu forced a smile, walked past her, and slid into his car. But instead of driving toward the airport as he had suggested, he parked just down the driveway where the trees provided cover. He opened his tablet and connected it to the hidden camera feed. His stomach knotted as he adjusted the screen. The house looked quiet, the study still and untouched. He sat back in his seat, the tablet balanced on his knees, and felt the first wave of unease wash over him. He had acted against his own principles. He had planted suspicion in a place where there had only ever been trust. And yet, the test had begun. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness as Keanu remained seated in his car, the tablet glowing faintly in his lap. The feed from the hidden camera flickered for a moment before stabilizing, giving him a wide view of the office. Dust floated lazily through the shafts of sunlight cutting across the room. The open safe, its door heavy and dark, loomed like a silent question. Keanu's chest rose and fell with uneasy breaths. He had been on film sets where explosions thundered all around him, where fight sequences demanded precision down to the split second. He had been in situations where his body was pushed to the edge of exhaustion. Yet none of those moments left him as unsettled as watching his own house through a secret lens. This wasn't action. This was something personal. A quiet gamble with a human heart. He thought of Maria as the second stretched on. He remembered the first day she came to his home, her hand slightly trembling as she held her resume, her accent careful but clear. She had spoken about her daughter with pride, explaining that she wanted to build a better life in the United States after tragedy struck her family. Keanu had seen the grief hidden behind her smile, though she never dwelled on it. Over the years, her presence became a fixture, a steady current of reliability. If he was away on set, he knew the house would be in perfect order when he returned. If he came home unexpectedly, she greeted him with the same calm respect. It wasn't money that tied Maria to her work, it was dignity. And that was what troubled Keanu now. Why was he allowing doubt to creep into a bond built on trust? He tightened his grip on the tablet as guilt clawed at him. Through the feed, he finally saw her enter the study. She carried her usual supplies, a small caddy of cleaners, a folded rag draped over her arm. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate, almost ritualistic. She dusted the shelves near the door first, just as she always did, moving clockwise around the room. When she reached the desk, her eyes flicked toward the safe. She froze. Keanu leaned forward unconsciously, his pulse quickening. Maria set her cleaning caddy down on the desk and walked toward the open safe. She bent slightly, her hand hovering just shy of the steel door. The safe stood wide open, its contents exposed in a way that screamed of either negligence or invitation. Maria's expression changed. Surprise first, then confusion, and then something heavier, fear. She stepped closer, peering inside. The journals, the cash envelope, the sealed folders, all sat untouched, waiting. She didn't reach for them. Instead, she clasped her hands together, as though she were trying to stop herself from even considering the thought. Keanu's heart pounded as he watched her lips move silently. Though there was no sound, he could see the shape of a whispered prayer. For a moment, she turned her head toward the door, as if checking to make sure she was alone. Then she took a step back, shaking her head slowly. It wasn't temptation that consumed her, it was fear of what the open safe meant. Her eyes darted across the office, as though searching for answers. Keanu exhaled, his chest tightening. This was not what he expected. He thought he would confirm her honesty and end the matter quietly. But her reaction was too intense, too loaded with meaning. She wasn't merely surprised. She was disturbed. Something about the sight of the safe had struck a nerve deeper than trust or betrayal. And Keanu, watching from the car, felt a chill he could not explain. Maria lingered in front of the safe, her breathing uneven, her hands trembling slightly as if the steel door radiated a memory too painful to bear. Instead of touching the cash or leafing through the journals, she crouched lower, her eyes locking on a sealed folder tucked neatly against the inner wall. Keanu recognized it instantly from the feed. It was one of the countless legal packets his lawyers had delivered years ago, evidence from cases he never fully examined. To him, it was paperwork. To Maria, it seemed to be something else entirely. She reached forward cautiously, her fingers brushing the edge of the folder. The camera caught the way her entire body shuddered as her eyes fell on a name scrawled across the tab in bold black letters. Miguel Alvarez. Her husband. The man she had mourned. The man she spoke of in soft tones during breaks. The man she said had been silenced by violence in Mexico. Her knees buckled as she pressed a hand to her mouth, a muffled sob escaping her. She clutched the folder to her chest, as though she were holding Miguel himself. The office around her blurred as tears welled in her eyes. She sank into the chair by the desk, shoulders heaving with silent grief. Through the feed, Keanu could see her lips moving, hear nothing but imagining her words, questions, accusations, maybe even prayers. He felt his own throat tighten. This was no longer a test. This was a doorway opening into a tragedy far larger than he had anticipated. He had expected a simple answer, proof that Maria's honesty matched his faith in her. Instead, he had stumbled into something heavy, something laced with pain and danger. From the car, he leaned back against the seat, the tablet slipping slightly in his grip. His heart raced. The guilt of planting the camera, of doubting her, now seemed trivial compared to the storm he had awakened. The safe had not only revealed its contents, it had revealed a truth Maria was never meant to confront here, in his home, on an ordinary morning. Then, she did something that sent a cold wave through him. She lifted her head, her tear-streaked face turning directly toward the lens of the hidden camera. Her eyes were steady now, sharp with the clarity of someone who had lost everything once and would not be fooled again. "Mr. Reeves," she said aloud, her voice low, but cutting through the silence of the study. "I know you are watching. We need to talk." Keanu's breath caught. His test had ended. What lay ahead was a reckoning he never expected. Maria Alvarez had cleaned the Reeves home so many times that the rhythm of it had become almost sacred. She always began with the living room, dusting the corners, straightening the shelves, checking the windows for streaks. From there, she moved room to room in the same careful sequence, humming old Spanish lullabies her mother once sang. It wasn't just work. It was order, a way of imposing calm on a world that had often spun out of control for her. That morning, she entered the study with her caddy in hand, expecting nothing unusual. The smell of polished wood and the faint musk of old paper always greeted her there. She placed her rag on the desk, ready to wipe down the bookshelves. But then her eyes fell on the gaping steel door of the safe, its mouth wide open like something abandoned mid-thought. Her heart leapt into her throat. For a moment she thought she had done something wrong, perhaps left the safe open the last time she dusted in here. But no, she had never touched it. She never would. That safe was a boundary, a symbol of privacy she respected without question. To see it open now was like finding a stranger standing in her kitchen at night. Her hands trembled as she set the rag back on the desk. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting Keanu to appear in the doorway and scold her. But the house was silent. The open safe glared at her from across the room, daring her to look closer. Against her better judgment, she stepped forward. The first thing she saw was cash. An envelope thick enough to be tempting. Then, the journals, stacked unevenly, their leather edges worn with age. She felt no curiosity toward those. She had no desire to steal, no interest in reading the private thoughts of the man who had treated her with nothing but respect. She only wanted to close the safe, to walk away and pretend it had never happened. But then her eyes caught on something that froze her in place. A folder, sealed, but labeled clearly in black marker. The letters burned into her vision. Miguel Alvarez, her husband's name. Her breath caught, and the room spun. She reached forward, her fingers grazing the folder's edge, as though touching something holy. Miguel, the man she buried in Mexico 3 years ago. The man who never came home from the story he was investigating. The man who refused to stop writing about corruption even when threats piled at their door. She felt her knees weaken as a rush of grief crashed over her. Tears blurred her vision. She pulled the folder from the safe, clutching it to her chest. Her whole body shook as memories flooded back. Miguel laughing with their daughter Isabella at the dinner table. Miguel scribbling notes late into the night. Miguel insisting that truth was worth sacrifice. Then the last memory, the phone call, the news that his body had been found by the side of a road. Her sobs filled the study. She did not care if anyone heard. Her trembling hands pressed against the folder, as though Miguel's heart might still be beating inside it. She lifted her face, her voice raw with pain. "Mr. Reeves," she whispered at first, then louder, certain he was listening. "I know you are watching. We need to talk." Outside, in his car, Keanu's eyes widened as the words reached him through the tablet speakers. The name Miguel Alvarez echoed in his mind, leaving him cold. Maria did not release the folder. Her fingers dug into the cardboard cover until her knuckles turned white. The name scrawled across the tab was not some coincidence, not a duplicate belonging to another man with the same last name. No, this was hers. This was him. Miguel Alvarez, her husband, the man whose loss had carved a hollow place in her chest that never closed. She laid the folder carefully on the desk, as though afraid it might vanish if she blinked. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside were documents stamped with logos of companies she did not recognize, case numbers, and pages dense with legal jargon. But the details she could not mistake were Miguel's. His birth date, his passport photo clipped to a report, notes describing him as a journalist of interest. One chilling word repeated in the margins: neutralized. Maria's chest heaved as though she were suffocating. She had always believed Miguel's death was senseless violence, another casualty in a country where truth often died before the ink dried. She never imagined that somewhere, across the border, in the home of a man she trusted, sat evidence that someone had marked her husband as a target. Her tears fell fast now, dropping onto the pages. She pressed her hand over the photo of Miguel, tracing the edges of his face with her fingertips. His determined eyes stared back at her, the same eyes that once told her, "If I stop writing, I stop being me." Why was this in Keanu Reeves' safe? The question thundered in her mind. He was an actor, a man of films and cameras, not a man entangled in the corruption Miguel had fought. She wanted to believe Keanu had nothing to do with it, that he wasn't part of the dark network that silenced her husband. But how else could his name, his photo, his life end up in these files? She pushed the folder away, stood, and paced the room, clutching her temples. She spoke aloud, unable to hold the words inside. "What is this? Why do you have this?" Her voice cracked with rage and sorrow. She turned back toward the hidden camera, her tear-streaked face lifted to the lens. "You know, don't you? You know what happened to him." In the driveway, Keanu sat rigid, in the driver's seat, the tablet heavy in his lap. The sound of her voice pierced him, each word like an accusation. He had no answer. He didn't even know how that folder ended up in the safe. He had never opened every file that his legal team delivered years ago. To him, they were clutter from lawsuits, piles of evidence boxed and stored away. Now, watching Maria unravel, he realized those documents carried a history far more sinister than he had guessed. Maria returned to the desk and hugged the folder to her chest once more. "Miguel," she whispered, rocking slightly in the chair. "All this time I thought your voice was lost, but it's here. Your story is here." The sound of her grief filled the study, each sob pulling at Keanu's conscience. He had set out to test loyalty. Instead, he had uncovered a wound that never healed and a truth that might consume them both. Maria's sobs slowly gave way to silence. Though her body still trembled, she sat rigid in the chair, the folder clutched to her chest as if someone might come and rip it from her arms. Her eyes, swollen and red, fixed once more on the corner of the study where she felt the presence of the hidden camera. She was certain she was not alone. "Mr. Reeves," she said again, her voice steady now despite the tears streaking her face. "If you are watching, you owe me an answer. Why is my husband's life in your safe? Why is his death marked like it was planned?" Her words lingered in the air, heavy and accusing. "Keanu," watching from the car, could barely breathe. His fingers tightened around the steering wheel, though he hadn't started the engine. His mind reeled with memories of when the files first arrived, stacks of sealed envelopes from law firms after a settlement years ago. He had kept them, unopened, because he believed in documenting everything but never prying into what wasn't his concern. Now, he wished he had. Because within those pages, Miguel Alvarez had been reduced to a name on a list, a life cataloged like an expendable detail. On the screen, Maria rose slowly, her grief turning to resolve. She placed the folder carefully on the desk, wiped her face with the edge of her apron, and whispered to herself, "I left everything behind to protect Isabella. I buried Miguel without answers. And now, the truth sits here, in front of me, in a stranger's house." She pressed her palm flat against the desk and leaned toward the camera. "No more silence. I want to know what you know. I want to know why my husband had to die." Keanu felt his chest tighten. The guilt of planting the camera seemed trivial compared to the storm unfolding before him. He had not betrayed Maria's trust. With suspicion, he had betrayed her by unknowingly holding the remnants of a man's fight for justice inside a safe she dusted every week. Maria's breathing steadied. Her tears slowed, but her eyes burned with determination. "I am not afraid anymore," she declared softly, almost to herself. "If Miguel's truth is here, then I will not run from it." In the driveway, Keanu's pulse thundered. The test was over. The question of loyalty no longer mattered. What Maria had found went deeper than honesty or theft. It was a revelation that tied her life, her loss, and his past choices together in ways he could no longer ignore. The folder was not just paper. It was a doorway, and stepping through it meant facing a truth that could not be contained inside any safe. Maria's trembling hands hovered over the folder. Her eyes locked on Miguel's name as though the letters themselves were alive. She could no longer hold back the flood of memory that surged through her. It began with the image of him at their small kitchen table in Mexico City, leaning forward with his notebook, scribbling furiously while the smell of coffee filled the air. He was a man who seemed to belong to two worlds at once: the tender husband who teased her gently about her cooking, and the relentless reporter who refused to stop chasing stories that others feared to even whisper about. Miguel had always told her that the truth was not just an idea, it was a duty. He would come home with his shirt rumpled, his tie loosened, his eyes tired but burning with conviction. He told her about mayors shaking hands with men who carried guns under their coats, about judges who ruled in favor of criminals because their pockets were lined with blood money, about businessmen who pretended to build schools but really laundered funds for cartels. Maria listened in fear, but also in awe. His bravery frightened her, yet it was also the very thing that made her love him more fiercely. She remembered the night he held their daughter Isabella in his arms, kissing her forehead while whispering promises of a better world. "One day," he told Maria, "she will grow up in a place where truth is stronger than fear." But that promise had been stolen. The memory that cut deepest was the night he didn't come home. Maria had set dinner on the table, waiting for the sound of his keys at the door. Hours passed. The food grew cold. The phone rang. A voice on the other end spoke too quickly, too harshly. The words blurred together: accident, body found near the outskirts, case closed. She remembered dropping the phone, her hands shaking so violently she couldn't pick it up again. Isabella had stood in the hallway, confused, asking, "Where's Papa?" Maria had no answer. In the days that followed, she learned the truth the officials refused to acknowledge. Miguel had not died in an accident. His body bore marks of violence, his notes had vanished, and his colleagues whispered of threats made in hushed tones. But the authorities wrote it off, just as they did with countless other journalists who vanished or turned up dead. For Maria, the grief was unbearable, but the danger was worse. Strangers followed her. Her phone rang with silence late at night, and Isabella woke screaming from nightmares she could not explain. That was when Maria made the hardest decision of her life. She left. She sold what little she had, took Isabella by the hand, and crossed into a country she hoped would give them safety. She cleaned houses, scrubbed floors, and pieced together a fragile life from the ruins of her old one. The pain of losing Miguel never left her, but at least she believed she had escaped the shadow of the men who silenced him. Now, standing in Keanu Reeves' study, with her husband's name printed on a folder that should never have been here, Maria felt the ground shift beneath her. It was as if the past had followed her, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the day she could no longer run from it. Keanu watched her from the tablet in his car, his chest tightening with each sob, each whispered word of grief. The realization struck him hard. Those files, the safe he had inherited from his lawyers, were not just relics of forgotten lawsuits. They were threads in a web of corruption that had ensnared a man who died for telling the truth. And Maria had walked unknowingly into its center. Maria's breathing grew uneven as she turned another page in the folder. Each line seemed to cut her deeper. There were transcripts of emails between nameless officials, notes about problematic journalists, and next to Miguel's name, the word escalating. She pressed her hand to her lips, struggling to quiet the sob that wanted to escape. This was confirmation of everything she already feared but never could prove. Miguel hadn't simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had been hunted. Her mind raced back to nights when Miguel warned her not to answer the door after dark, when he insisted she change her routines, when he whispered that the stories he was working on were bigger than anything he had uncovered before. He had uncovered ties between politicians and cartel leaders, proof that government offices themselves had been paid to turn away. Maria remembered asking him to stop, to think of Isabella, to put his family first. He only smiled that tired but unyielding smile and told her, "If I stop writing, others will keep dying. I can't walk away." And now here, in this safe, sat the evidence of what his refusal had cost him. She closed her eyes and saw Isabella's face, only a teenager now, still carrying the hollow look of a child who lost her father too soon. Maria had tried to protect her, to shield her from the ugliest parts of Miguel's story. But how long could she keep the truth buried if this folder existed? If someone beyond their family knew what had happened? In the driveway, Keanu could hardly sit still, watching Maria's pain tore into him. Every fiber of his being told him to leave the car, to run back inside, to take the folder gently from her hands and explain that he had never known what it contained. But something heavier than guilt held him back for the moment. He was processing the revelation that his safe carried the echoes of Miguel Alvarez's murder. The thought that Maria had trusted him for years, walked past that safe countless times, while unknowingly living in the same house as the files that marked her husband's death, shook him. He remembered when those files had come into his possession, his legal team had been dealing with a lawsuit against a data firm accused of mishandling sensitive records. Boxes of evidence had been delivered to him after the press event. Case settled, most of them sealed. Keanu had kept them for accountability, but never pride. He thought they were dull records, names and numbers that meant little to him. He never imagined one of those names would be Miguel Alvarez. On the tablet, Maria pressed the folder to her chest and whispered through her tears, "You didn't die for nothing, Miguel. They wrote you down. They tried to erase you, but I see you." Her voice cracked on the last word, breaking into a sob that filled the room with raw ache. Keanu couldn't watch from the car anymore. The guilt of leaving her alone with that discovery burned in his chest. He slammed the tablet shut, opened the car door, and strode toward the house. His steps were quick, driven not by duty, but by the instinct that he couldn't allow Maria to carry this truth alone. Not even for another minute. Keanu pushed through the front door with urgency, his footsteps echoing in the stillness of the house. The familiar scent of lemon polish and fresh linen hit him as he moved quickly down the hall, but it did nothing to steady the pounding of his heart. When he reached the study, he stopped short. Maria was still seated at the desk, clutching the folder as though it were her husband himself. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes burned with a sharp mixture of grief and suspicion. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, and for a long moment, silence filled the room. "Why?" Her voice cracked but held firm. "Why did you have this? Why is my Miguel's name in your safe?" Keanu swallowed hard. His chest felt heavy, but he forced himself to step closer. "Maria, I swear to you, I didn't know. Those files, They came to me years ago after a legal case. I never opened them. I never saw his name until today." Maria searched his face, looking for even the smallest hint of deception. The room seemed to shrink around them, every second stretching unbearably. Keanu met her gaze without flinching, his own eyes shining with the weight of her pain. "I never would have hidden this from you if I had known," he said softly. "I'm so sorry you had to discover it this way." Maria's lips trembled as she clutched the folder tighter. "For 3 years, I thought his death was just another tragedy no one cared about. Now I find his life written here, reduced to a word neutralized, like he was nothing." Keanu's jaw tightened. He lowered himself into the chair across from her, his voice steady but full of sorrow. "He was not nothing, and he is not forgotten." He was silenced because he refused to stop telling the truth. That doesn't make him a victim. That makes him a hero. Her breath hitched. For the first time, her eyes softened. She had been carrying the memory of Miguel alone, weighed down by the fear that his fight had ended in vain. Now, in this quiet study, she felt something shift. Keanu's words did not erase the pain, but they lit a fragile spark of vindication. Keanu leaned forward, his tone turning resolute. "Whatever these files contain, they're not staying locked away anymore. If your husband's story is here, then we'll make sure it's told." Maria closed her eyes, letting the tears flow freely again. But this time there was something different in them. Not just grief, but the faintest thread of hope. Maria's grip on the folder was unyielding. She sat at Keanu's desk like a guardian, her shoulders rigid, her eyes red from tears but blazing with suspicion. The raw grief of moments before had hardened into something sharper. When Keanu stepped further into the study, she lifted her chin, her voice breaking through the silence with accusation. "Why?" she demanded. "Why do you have my husband's name? Were you part of this?" The words struck like blows. Keanu felt his throat tighten, his stomach twist. He shook his head firmly, his voice low but urgent. "Maria, no. I swear to you, I had no idea. I never touched those files. They came to me years ago after a lawsuit, boxes of evidence my lawyers didn't want destroyed. I kept them, thinking it was just legal clutter. I didn't know his name was inside." Maria's hand trembled as she opened the folder and shoved a page toward him. Her fingers stabbed at the word written in black ink beside Miguel's photo. "Neutralized. Explain this. They marked him like prey, like an animal on a list, and it was sitting in your house all this time." Keanu's breath came heavy as he read the word. Neutralized. Cold, clinical, final. His chest constricted as though the very letters were squeezing the air out of him. He looked up at Maria, seeing in her eyes not only grief, but the desperate need for an answer that could bring sense to the senseless. "Maria," he said carefully, "I wasn't part of this. But this word, I know what it means. I've seen it before, in reports tied to criminal networks. It doesn't just mean silenced. It means eliminated. Intentionally." Maria's face contorted, the confirmation hitting her like a second death. She clutched the folder back to her chest, rocking slightly, whispering, "I knew it. I knew it wasn't an accident." Then her voice rose, fierce with anguish. "But why keep it locked away? Why didn't you destroy it? Why live in this house with his death buried inside your safe?" Keanu stepped closer, his hands open, his voice urgent but soft. "Because I didn't know. I swear to you, Maria, I never opened every folder. I thought they were remnants of cases long over, papers no one wanted to deal with. But now I see, this isn't just paperwork. This is evidence. And it's dangerous." Her eyes narrowed. "Dangerous to who? To you? To me? To Isabella?" "To everyone it exposes," Keanu said gravely. "If Miguel's name is here, that means someone powerful wanted him silenced. And if these files ended up with me, even by accident, then whoever was behind this is bigger than we imagine. Maria, you didn't just find your husband's story. You found proof of why he died. The room pulsed with the weight of the truth. Maria's breathing grew ragged, her fingers pressing against the folder as though afraid it might vanish. Keanu's eyes never left hers, steady, filled with sorrow but also resolve. For the first time, they both understood this was no longer about trust or honesty. It was about survival. Maria's fingers dug into the cardboard cover, her voice sharp and trembling. Do you realize what this means? For years, I thought my husband was another forgotten name. Now I see it written here like an execution order. And it was under your roof all this time. Her words pierced the air like shards of glass. Keanu winced but did not look away. He knew no excuse could erase the image of that word burned into her mind. He forced himself to steady his tone, though his pulse hammered in his ears. Maria, I understand how it looks, but I promise you, I didn't choose to keep this from you. If I had known Miguel's name was in there, I would have brought it to you myself. Maria rose from the chair, folder clutched to her chest like a shield. Her frame was small, fragile from years of work and grief, yet her presence filled the study. If you weren't part of it, then why would your lawyers even have these files? Why would someone like you, an actor, end up with documents that mark the death of a journalist in Mexico? Keanu exhaled, his gaze dropping briefly before meeting hers again. Because the lawsuit wasn't just about finances. It was about data, sensitive data being sold to people who had no right to it. Names, addresses, personal histories. My lawyers discovered that the company involved wasn't just mishandling information, they were feeding it to criminals. The case was settled quietly, but the evidence remained. They handed it to me for safekeeping. I never went through it. I didn't realize what kind of darkness it held. Maria's lip quivered. So you're saying my husband's life, his work, his death, were all tangled in some file you didn't bother to read? The accusation stung. Keanu's shoulders sagged, his voice quieter now, laced with remorse. Yes, that's the truth, and I live with the guilt of that neglect now. But Maria, I am not your enemy. I didn't silence him. I didn't want this. Her breath hitched, but the fire in her eyes remained. She turned the page toward him again, forcing him to look once more at the word stamped beside Miguel's name. Neutralized. Do you know how many nights I lay awake hearing that word in my head? Even before I saw it, I knew they killed him because he wouldn't stop. And now I see the proof. What do we do with this, Mr. Reeves? What happens now? Keanu felt the weight of her question pressing on him like a stone. His chest tightened as he realized the magnitude of the discovery. This wasn't just about Maria's husband anymore. This folder connected to networks that stretched across borders, tying violence, politics, and business in one chain of corruption. Whoever wrote those words had power, and power never gave up its secrets willingly. He took a step closer, his voice calm but firm. What happens now is that we don't let this sit in silence any longer. If Miguel died because he told the truth, then the least we can do is make sure that truth doesn't die with him. Maria blinked rapidly, her tears spilling over once more. But this time, they were not only tears of grief. They carried something else: anger, resolve, the beginnings of courage. Maria's hand shook as she set the folder back on the desk, her voice raw. For years, I tried to bury this pain. I left my country, my family, everything I knew, because I thought silence was the only way to keep Isabella safe. But silence never brought me peace. And now this proof. It terrifies me, but it also tells me Miguel's fight isn't finished. Keanu's chest tightened at her words. He leaned forward, resting his palms on the desk, his voice steady and deliberate. Maria, you're right. His fight isn't finished. And maybe fate put these files in my care for a reason. I can't change what happened to him, but I can promise you this. I won't let you face this truth alone. Not now, not ever. She studied him closely, searching his face for the slightest flicker of deception. All she saw was sorrow mingled with determination. Slowly, she released the folder, letting it rest between them like a fragile bridge. I need to know everything, she whispered. Who marked his name? Who gave the order? Why he was left to die on a roadside. If I don't find those answers, I'll never forgive myself. Keanu nodded, his expression grim. Then, we'll find them. But understand, Maria, if these files are real, then the people behind them are dangerous. They won't want us looking. They won't want this coming to light. By opening this door, we're stepping into something that could put us both at risk. Maria lifted her chin, her voice trembling but firm. I've been living in fear for 3 years. I won't live that way anymore. The room fell into silence, the weight of her declaration echoing in the air. For Keanu, what began as a test of honesty had revealed something far greater, a conspiracy wrapped in tragedy, and a woman determined to face it. The safe had been opened, but what it unleashed could not be closed again. Keanu drew in a breath, steadying himself as he looked across the desk at Maria. The folder with Miguel's name lay between them, but now he reached into the safe again. He pulled out another stack of files, the edges rough, some still sealed in envelopes. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice carried a quiet certainty. Maria, I need to tell you something I've kept private, he said. I haven't told the media. I haven't told my friends, not even my closest colleagues. For months I've been quietly working with the FBI. Maria's eyes widened. She stiffened, her grip tightening on the edge of the desk. The FBI? Why would you be working with them? What do they have to do with my husband? Keanu lowered the files onto the desk, his expression grim. Because these papers aren't just about you or Miguel. They're part of something bigger. Years ago, when I inherited these documents after that lawsuit, I suspected there was more inside than I understood. Some of the names I recognized: activists, journalists, whistleblowers, people who vanished or who died under suspicious circumstances. I couldn't ignore it. I reached out to a contact in the bureau, someone I trust, and I've been passing them information slowly, piece by piece. Maria blinked, stunned, into silence. Her breath quickened as she opened one of the folders he handed her. Inside were profiles, grainy photos clipped to pages of typed notes. She flipped through them, her chest tightening with every word. One report listed a woman in South America who had exposed corruption in oil companies. Another described a whistleblower in Europe who disappeared after testifying in court. Each file read like a death sentence, disguised as paperwork. Then she saw it again, neutralized, written in the margins, in the same cold ink. Her hands trembled. This is a list of lives destroyed, families broken, just like mine. She lifted her eyes, fury and fear colliding. You mean to tell me Miguel's death wasn't just about Mexico? He was part of this bigger machine? Keanu nodded slowly. Yes, and that's why the FBI is interested. This isn't one country's corruption, it's international. Networks of power working together, sharing information, erasing voices that speak too loudly. And Miguel, he was on their radar because his reporting threatened to uncover a connection between the cartels and businessmen who had ties beyond Mexico. That's why he was targeted. Maria pressed her hand over her mouth as tears welled again. Her body shook, not just with grief now, but with terror. If his name is here, if his story is in these files, then that means they know me too. They know Isabella. Keanu reached across the desk, his voice steady and protective. Listen to me. You're safe here. I won't let anything happen to you or your daughter. I've already taken precautions, and the FBI knows about you now too. You're not invisible to them anymore, and that means you're under their protection. But Maria's expression didn't soften. She stared at the files with haunted eyes, the word neutralized echoing in her mind. For years, she thought she had escaped by leaving Mexico. Now, she realized she might never have been free at all. Maria pushed back from the desk, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. She paced the study, her hands gripping her temples, as if the weight of the discovery might crush her. All these years, I thought I was running from shadows, but it wasn't shadows, was it? It was them, the same people who killed Miguel. Keanu followed her with his eyes, his voice calm but firm. You're right. They don't just target one person. They target anyone who threatens the silence they depend on. That's why the Bureau is watching these documents closely. They know there are names here that connect deaths across countries. But they move carefully, because exposing this too soon could compromise the investigation. Maria stopped, spinning to face him, her eyes blazing. And what about me? About Isabella? Do they know our names are in their systems too? Keanu hesitated, the truth heavy on his tongue. He picked up another folder, sliding it across the desk toward her. I won't lie to you. Yes, they know who you are. The Bureau confirmed it. You were listed in connection to Miguel, marked as someone to watch. That's why I kept you close, why I never questioned you being here. I thought if I could protect you quietly, it would be enough. Maria's face paled, her hands clenching into fists. So all this time, while I was dusting this house and cleaning these rooms, the people who murdered my husband still had their eyes on me? On my daughter? And you didn't tell me? Keanu's voice broke with regret. I didn't tell you because I thought it would only terrify you. I believed you were safer not knowing until the Bureau had more to act on. But after what you found today, there's no more hiding. You deserve to know everything. Maria's breath came in shallow gasps, but beneath the fear, there was something else rising fury. She slammed her hand down on the desk, the folder rattling under her palm. My husband fought so hard to bring the truth into the light, and he died for it. If they think I'll let them bury him and silence me too, they're wrong. Keanu nodded, his voice carrying a quiet conviction. Then we stand together. You and Isabella aren't alone anymore. If the Bureau is moving slowly, then we'll move faster. I still have contacts I can trust, people who know how to get information out safely. If Miguel's death was part of this network, then we'll expose it for what it island. Maria looked at him, her tears drying into a hardened glare. But how long do we have before they come for me too? Before they realize I've seen this? As if in answer to her question, headlights suddenly cut across the window, flooding the study with a harsh white glow. Maria froze, her body stiffening. Keanu turned toward the sound, every muscle tightening, in instinctive alarm. Outside, a black SUV rolled slowly up the driveway, its engine low and deliberate. Maria's voice cracked into a whisper. Who are they? Keanu's jaw clenched. He moved toward the window, his eyes narrowing as two figures stepped out of the vehicle. The night around them seemed to grow heavier. I don't know yet, he said, but something isn't right. The two men who stepped out of the SUV moved with slow precision, their silhouettes tall against the flood of headlights. They wore dark suits, their expressions unreadable in the dim glow. One of them adjusted his jacket, revealing the glint of a badge clipped at his belt. To an untrained eye, it looked official. To Keanu, it looked staged. Maria stood frozen near the desk, her knuckles white against the folder she refused to release. Are they FBI? She whispered, her voice trembling. Keanu shook his head, his instincts sharpened by years of navigating the deceptive faces of Hollywood and the even colder truths he had encountered in private life. If they were Bureau, they wouldn't arrive unannounced at night. They'd call first, they'd come with backup. This is different. The men paused at the base of the steps leading to the front door. One lifted a radio to his mouth, speaking in low tones, his gaze sweeping across the house. The other scanned the driveway as though measuring every possible exit. Maria's chest rose and fell rapidly. She gripped Keanu's arm, her whisper urgent. They know I saw the files. They're here for me. Keanu's eyes stayed locked on the window, his jaw set. Or they're here for both of us. Either way, we're not opening that door until I know who they are. He moved quickly, shutting the safe and sliding the stack of files out of sight. Then he turned to Maria, his voice steady but commanding. Stay behind me. No matter what happens, don't speak until I say so. If they're who I think they are, this isn't a visit, it's a warning. Maria clutched the folder against her chest, her fear giving way to determination. Then they'll learn the same thing Miguel's killers should have known. I won't be silenced. Outside, the men started up the steps, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. The confrontation had only just begun. The sharp rap on the door echoed through the house, each knock deliberate and heavy. Maria flinched, clutching the folder tighter against her chest. Keanu motioned for her to stay back, then moved toward the entryway with cautious steps. Through the narrow window beside the door, he saw the two men waiting under the harsh beam of the SUV's headlights. One held up a badge, tilting it just enough to catch the light. "Federal agents," he called out. "We need to speak with you. It's urgent." Keanu studied the badge closely, his eyes narrowing. It looked real at first glance, but the details were off. The emblem was slightly crooked, the lettering faintly misaligned. It was the kind of counterfeit that might fool someone under pressure, but not him. He had worked with enough law enforcement to know authenticity when he saw it. He didn't open the door. Instead, he spoke through the wood. "If you're federal agents, then you know protocol. You'd have called ahead, and you wouldn't be standing here without backup. Who sent you?" There was a pause on the other side. The taller man leaned toward the door, his voice firm but unconvincing. "Sir, this is official business. We don't have time for protocol." Keanu felt the unease tighten in his chest. He turned back toward Maria, who stood rigid in the hallway, her eyes wide with fear. She whispered, "They're lying. I can feel it." He nodded, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "Their badges are fake. They're not who they say they are." Through the window, he watched as one of the men lifted a radio to his mouth, speaking in clipped tones. The other scanned the perimeter of the house with restless precision, as though mapping exits. This wasn't a visit, it was surveillance. Then, without warning, Maria's phone buzzed in her pocket. She fumbled to pull it out, her breath catching as she read the message on the screen. Her hands shook violently, and the phone nearly slipped from her grasp. Keanu stepped closer, his voice urgent. "What is it?" Maria's face went pale, her lips trembling as she turned the screen toward him. A photo filled the display, her daughter Isabella standing outside her school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. But she wasn't alone. Two adults flanked her, each with a hand resting casually but firmly near her arms. The message beneath the photo was short, cold, and merciless. "We should talk. Come alone, or she disappears forever." Maria collapsed against the wall, her knees buckling. The phone clattered to the floor as sobs tore from her throat. "No, no, no. They have her. They have Isabella." Keanu caught her before she hit the ground, his arms steadying her trembling frame. He lifted the phone from the floor, his jaw clenched, eyes dark with fury. He read the message again, the photo burning into his mind. He placed a firm hand on Maria's shoulder, grounding her. "Listen to me. We're going to get her back. I promise you, Maria. They will not take your daughter from you. Not while I'm here." She looked up at him through tears, her voice breaking. "But they said come alone. If I do what they ask, they'll kill me. If I don't, they'll kill her." Keanu met her gaze, his voice low and resolute. "That's why we don't play by their rules. We fight smart. We fight together." Maria clung to Keanu's arm, her sobs quieting into ragged breaths. Her whole body shook as she whispered, "They'll hurt her. She's just a child, Keanu. She has nothing to do with this." Keanu tightened his grip on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "That's exactly why they're using her. They think fear will break you, but we won't let it. We'll find a way to bring her back safely." Outside, the two men shifted restlessly near the SUV, speaking into their radios again. Keanu glanced back through the side window. The way they stood, the way their eyes scanned the property, told him everything. They weren't waiting for a conversation. They were waiting for orders. He turned back to Maria, lowering his voice. "We can't open that door. They're not here to negotiate. They're here to confirm you're inside, to keep you scared until they have what they want. The real trap is the meeting they're demanding." Maria pressed her hand to her mouth, her tears brimming again. "If I go alone, they'll kill me. If I don't, they'll take Isabella away forever." "What do they expect me to do?" Keanu's voice softened, steady as stone. "They expect you to panic, to obey without thinking. That's how they control people. But we're not going to give them that. We'll answer them, but on our terms." He picked up her phone and studied the message again. The photo of Isabella cut through him like a blade. She looked so small standing between those adults, so unaware of the danger that shadowed her. He tapped the screen, then handed the phone back to Maria. Text them back, tell them you'll come, but don't say when, buy us time. Maria hesitated, fear pulling at her. If they know I'm stalling, they'll hurt her. They won't risk it yet, Keanu said firmly. She's leverage. They need her alive. Every second we hold them off gives us more room to act. Maria's trembling fingers typed the words he suggested. I'll come. Don't hurt her. Please. She hit send, and the weight of it pressed into her chest like iron. Almost. Instantly, the phone buzzed again. The reply was colder than the first. Midnight. Griffith Park. Come alone. No police. Maria's breath caught, her eyes wide with dread. They gave me a time. They gave me a place. Keanu read the message, his jaw tightening. Good. That means they think they're in control. But it also means we know where to look. Maria shook her head violently, panic breaking through. Keanu, you don't understand. If they even sense you're there, if they see anything they don't like, they'll kill her in front of me. I can't take that risk. He placed both hands gently on her arms, his voice calm but fierce. You won't be taking it alone. You have me. And I've faced men like this before. Men who think power is fear. They always underestimate the people they try to silence. Her lips trembled, torn between despair and hope. How can you be so sure? Because I've already seen their mistake, he said, glancing toward the SUV. They came here pretending to be agents, flashing fake badges. That means they're desperate. Desperate men make sloppy choices, and sloppy choices leave openings we can use. Maria sank back into the chair, her hands gripping the phone as though it were her only lifeline. Openings don't matter if they kill her before we can act, she whispered. She's all I have left, Keanu. If they take her, I have nothing. Keanu crouched in front of her, his eyes steady, his voice low but unyielding. Listen to me. They sent you that picture to break you. But what they really did was give us proof Isabella is still alive. They gave us a place and a time. That means we have a chance, and I promise you we're not going to waste it. Her chest heaved, torn between fear and the fragile thread of trust she saw in his eyes. Slowly, she nodded, though her fingers still trembled. Outside, the two men by the SUV spoke into their radios again. One glanced toward the door, then tapped the roof of the vehicle. The headlights flickered off, and the engine started. Maria and Keanu watched through the blinds as the SUV backed down the driveway, its taillights glowing red before disappearing into the night. The silence that followed was deafening. Maria's body sagged with both relief and dread. They're gone, but they'll be waiting. Keanu rose to his feet, determination hardening his features. Let them wait. They think they're holding all the cards, but they don't know what we're capable of. We'll get Isabella back, Maria. I swear it. She buried her face in her hands, whispering through her tears. Please, don't let them hurt her. Keanu placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his words carrying the weight of a vow. They won't. Not while I'm standing. In that moment, the fear that threatened to consume Maria was met with something stronger. The unshakable resolve of a man who refused to let her fight this battle alone. Keanu didn't waste a second after the SUV disappeared into the night. He pulled his phone from his pocket and scrolled through his secured contacts until he found the one name he trusted in moments like this: Agent Miller. He pressed the call button, pacing the study as the line clicked, and a low voice answered. Miller, the agent said. Keanu kept his tone steady, but urgent. It's Reeves. I've got a situation. 2 men just showed up at my place flashing fake badges, claiming to be federal agents. They left, but not before Maria, my housekeeper, got a text with a photo of her daughter, kidnapped. The message gave a location, Griffith Park, midnight. There was silence on the line. Then Miller's voice sharpened. You're certain the badges were fake? I've worked with real agents. These weren't them. Too sloppy, too rehearsed. and the SUV left after a few minutes like they were only confirming we were inside. Miller cursed under his breath. "You're right to call me. We've had chatter about imposters posing as feds in LA, tied to international contractors. If they've taken Maria's daughter, this is serious. Reeves, listen to me carefully. Do not go alone." Keanu glanced at Maria, who sat rigid on the couch, her face pale. Her eyes locked on the phone she clutched. He lowered his voice. "They specifically said no police, no FBI. If they see anything that looks official, they'll hurt the girl. We can't risk that." Miller's tone dropped even lower. "That's exactly what they want you to believe. These people know how to use fear. They killed her husband for digging too deep. They'll use her daughter to finish the job if they can. But we're not blind. You won't walk into this without backup, even if it's off the record." Keanu closed his eyes briefly, weighing the options. He trusted Miller, but he also knew kidnappers could sniff out a setup instantly. 1 hour. That's all they gave us. "We'll work fast," Miller replied. "Keep your phone on. I'll track your signal. Whatever happens, don't try to handle this alone." When the call ended, Keanu turned to Maria. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and fury. "They have Isabella," she whispered, her voice breaking. "The same people who silenced Miguel found us here. Even in America, they found us." Keanu knelt in front of her, his voice firm but calm. "Maria, listen to me. You are not powerless, and neither is your daughter. They want you to think you're trapped, but that's how they control you. We are going to Griffith Park, yes, but we're not going scared. We're going smart." Her tears fell silently as she shook her head. "If they see you, they'll kill her. If they see anything suspicious, they'll end it right there." Keanu held her gaze, steady as stone. "Then we'll make sure they don't. I've been in situations like this before, and fear only makes mistakes. If we stay calm, if we think, we can outplay them. They don't know who they're dealing with." Maria clutched his hand, her voice trembling. "Please, just bring her back. She's all I have left." Keanu's jaw tightened with resolve. "We will, I promise you." The clock on the wall ticked steadily, each second pounding louder in Maria's ears. Midnight loomed closer with every breath. She sat forward, her hands gripping the edge of the couch as though it anchored her to the earth. "Keanu, what if they hurt her before we even get there? What if this is all just a trap to kill us both?" Keanu shook his head firmly. "They won't kill her before the meeting. Isabella is their leverage. Without her, they lose their bargaining power. Right now she's alive, Maria. That's the one certainty we have." Maria closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "That's what I told myself about Miguel too, that they wouldn't dare kill him. And then they did." Keanu's chest tightened at her words, but he refused to let doubt take root. This is different. Miguel stood against them publicly, and they wanted to make an example of him. But with Isabella, their goal is control. They want you desperate enough to do whatever they demand. That means she's still safe for now. Maria drew in a shaky breath, clinging to his logic as if it were a lifeline, but her voice still trembled. "I can't lose her, Keanu. She's my only reason for living. If they take her, I don't survive that." Keanu placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "And you won't, because I won't allow it. Do you understand me? I've seen what fear does to people, how it makes them freeze when they need to act. We can't afford that tonight. If we stay focused, we'll bring Isabella back." Her eyes searched his face, desperate for belief. Slowly, she nodded, though her body still shook. Keanu rose and began preparing quickly. He retrieved a small duffel bag from the closet, checking its contents: flashlight, first aid kit, burner phone, and a compact camera. Nothing that looked like weapons, nothing that would spook the kidnappers if they searched him. Just tools, subtle but useful. Maria watched him, her voice tight. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Keanu paused, his hand tightening on the zipper. "Not exactly this. But I've dealt with people who thought intimidation gave them power, and I learned that fear is their only real weapon. Once you strip that away, They're vulnerable. She studied him, the weight of his words sinking in. So what's the plan? He sat back down across from her, his eyes steady. We go to Griffith Park. You'll walk in as they asked. But you won't be alone. I'll be nearby, watching. Ready. Agent Miller and his team will shadow us at a distance, off the radar. No lights, no sirens, just quiet backup if things spiral. Maria's chest rose and fell sharply. If they see you, if they see anyone, they'll kill her. That's what they said. Keanu leaned closer, his voice calm but resolute. And if we give them everything they ask, they'll take Isabella anyway. Kidnappers don't keep promises. They only make them to buy time. We have to be ready for that. Maria pressed her trembling hands together, whispering a prayer under her breath. Keanu let her finish before placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder once more. You've been strong for 3 years, Maria. Tonight, you'll have to be stronger. But you won't have to do it alone. The house had gone still, but the tension inside pressed like a storm waiting to break. Maria sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, whispering her daughter's name over and over, as though repeating it might keep Isabella alive. Keanu stood by the window, scanning the quiet street, his mind racing through every possible scenario. At last, he turned back to her, his voice calm but carrying the edge of command. We leave in 30 minutes. Enough time to drive there and scout the ground before midnight. We'll move carefully. No surprises. Maria lifted her head, her face streaked with tears but her eyes burning with resolve. I don't care what happens to me. Just promise me she comes back. That's all I ask. Keanu knelt in front of her, his hand firm on hers. Maria, you matter too. Isabella needs her mother. And Miguel's fight, the one he died for, it still lives in you. We're bringing both of you out of this. That's the promise. Her lips trembled as she whispered, then let's go. They rose together, gathering only what was necessary. Maria carried nothing but her phone, still glowing with the kidnapper's demand. Keanu slung the duffel bag over his shoulder, his every movement precise, methodical, the calm of a man preparing for war without weapons. The clock struck 11:30 as they stepped out into the night. The air was cold, the silence unnerving. The driveway stretched before them like a path into the unknown. Maria hesitated, her breath shallow. Keanu touched her arm lightly, guiding her forward. Smart, not scared, he reminded her. That's how we win. And with those words, they walked toward the waiting darkness, into a night that would decide everything. Back inside the house, the silence felt heavier than before. Maria hovered near the couch, her body rigid with fear. But Keanu moved straight toward the study. He pulled the safe open once more, not to reveal the damning files this time, but to reach deeper. Maria followed, confused, as he removed a bundle of leather-bound journals stacked neatly in the corner. These aren't part of the case, he explained, setting them on the desk. These are mine. Years of keeping records notes about people who tried to exploit me, deals that went wrong, and the things I've done to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. Maria blinked, surprised. Why would you keep all of this? Keanu flipped open one of the journals, showing her pages filled with his handwriting, careful and deliberate. Names, dates, details of encounters that never made the news. He tapped the margin of one entry. Because memory fades, evidence disappears. But if I keep a record, then I know who I can trust and who I can't. These journals remind me of every promise I made to never let power crush the innocent, if I could help it. Maria's eyes softened, even through her fear. You've been carrying this burden for years. He nodded, closing the book. I made a vow a long time ago, Maria. If I had the chance to stand between cruelty and the people it tried to destroy, I wouldn't look away. That's why I know we can face this tonight. I have resources, people I trust, people who owe me favors, because once I stood up for them when no one else would. She frowned, clutching her arms. But we only have half an hour before midnight. Who could possibly help us now? Keanu reached for his phone, scrolling through a list until he found a number he hadn't called in months. Someone who never lets his phone stay off for long. He pressed the call, his voice steady when it connected. I need you." Maria watched as Keanu's tone shifted, his words brief but commanding. When the call ended, he slipped the phone back into his pocket. "He's coming. He'll be here in minutes." "Who is he?" Maria asked, her voice low, uncertain whether to feel comforted or alarmed. "A friend," Keanu said simply. "Daniel Cortez, retired Marine. He trained me for stunts years ago, but his real life was combat. He's been through fire and walked out alive. If anyone can help us rescue Isabella without surrendering, it's him." True to Keanu's word, the rumble of a truck echoed outside not 10 minutes later. Heavy boots sounded against the driveway, and then a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped through the doorway, his eyes sharp and his stance steady. His hair was cut close, streaked with gray, and his hands carried the quiet confidence of someone who had lived too many battles. "Reeves?" Daniel said with a curt nod, his voice gravelly. "Heard the tone in your voice. Figured it had to be bad." "It's worse than bad," Keanu admitted. He gestured to Maria, who rose with tears brimming in her eyes. "Her daughter's been taken. We have less than half an hour to get her back." Daniel's gaze softened as he looked at Maria, then hardened again as he turned to Keanu. "Tell me everything. We don't waste time." Keanu wasted no time. He laid the folder with Isabella's photo on the desk, next to the message demanding Maria come alone. Daniel leaned over, scanning the details quickly. His eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. "Classic leverage play," he muttered. "They want control, not negotiation. If you walk in blind, you'll never walk out." Maria's voice shook as she spoke, her hands twisting the hem of her blouse. "Then what do we do?" they said alone. "If they see either of you, they'll kill her. I can't risk it." Daniel crouched down in front of her, his voice steady but kind. "Ma'am, listen to me. They're counting on your fear. But fear makes mistakes, and mistakes keep their business alive. If you go alone, you give them all the power. That's how they win. If we plan, if we move carefully, we shift the power back to us." Maria swallowed hard, her tears spilling again. "But what if they hurt her while we plan? What if we're too late?" Keanu stepped in, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "Maria, she's alive right now because she's leverage. They won't risk killing her before they get what they want. That buys us time, and we use every second of it." Daniel straightened, his presence commanding. "Here's what we do. Maria, you'll still walk in like they asked. They'll expect it. But you won't be alone. Reeves and I will be close hidden, watching. We'll study their setup before you even step forward. The moment we see where they're holding Isabella, we act. Fast, clean, no warning." Maria shook her head, terrified. "If they see you, they won't." Daniel cut her off firmly. "I've done this before. You focus on keeping their attention. Reeves and I will focus on bringing your daughter back." Keanu nodded in agreement. "Maria, trust us. Tonight isn't just about survival. It's about refusing to let them win again. You lost Miguel to their corruption. You won't lose Isabella, not while we're breathing." Maria's chest rose and fell rapidly, her heart hammering. But as she looked at the two men before her, one she had trusted for years, another who radiated quiet strength, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Daniel grabbed the duffel bag Keanu had prepared and checked its contents with practiced efficiency. Good. Nothing flashy, nothing that screams threat. Just tools. That's how we like it. He looked at the clock, then back at them. "Time's almost up. Let's move." Maria wiped her face, her trembling slowing into steadier breaths. She stood, clutching the folder with Isabella's picture close to her chest. "For her," she whispered. Keanu and Daniel exchanged a silent look of understanding. There was no more room for doubt. Every second now counted. Together they stepped into the night once more, three souls bound by loss, resolve, and the fragile thread of courage that would have to carry them through the darkness waiting at Griffith Park. The drive through Los Angeles felt longer than it was, though the streets were nearly empty at that late hour. The city lights faded as Keanu steered toward the hills, the road narrowing into dark curves leading into Griffith Park. Maria sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands gripping the folder with Isabella's picture so tightly that the edges were creased. Every few seconds, her lips moved in silent prayer. Behind them, Daniel Cortez followed in his truck, headlights dimmed. His face was carved in concentration, his hand steady on the wheel. He kept a careful distance, close enough to intervene but far enough to avoid suspicion. When they entered the park, Keanu slowed the car. The air grew colder, the silence broken only by the hum of the engine. Up ahead, a white van sat parked beneath a grove of trees, its windows dark, its engine idling softly. The sight made Maria's chest seize. "There," she whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. "That's them." Keanu pulled the car to a stop. He placed a hand over Maria's. "Stay calm. Remember what we said. Smart, not scared." Through the windshield, they saw the scene unfold. Isabella sat on the ground, near the van, her wrists bound, her mouth gagged. Even in the dim glow of a lantern, Maria recognized her daughter's frightened eyes. A cry tore from her throat, but Keanu gripped her arm before she could fling open the door. "Not yet," he warned softly. Shadows shifted in the trees beyond the van. Men moved with quiet discipline, rifles slung across their shoulders. There were more than Maria expected, at least 6, maybe more, blending into the dark. Her stomach knotted with dread. From the van's side, a man stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his hair slicked back. The confidence in his stride carried menace, as though he was used to holding life and death in his hands. He stopped in the clearing, his voice carrying easily through the night. "Reeves," he called, smirking. "Glad you came. Saves me the trouble of dragging you here." Keanu opened the door slowly, stepping out with deliberate calm. He kept his hands visible, his expression unreadable. "I'm here," he said evenly. "But if you want something, you'll have to tell me what." The man gestured lazily toward Isabella, who whimpered behind her gag. "The files. You know the ones. You bring them, the girl walks away. You don't, and this ends badly for both of them." Maria stumbled out of the car, her voice breaking. "Please, she's just a child. Let her go." The man's smirk deepened. "Your husband thought the truth could save people, didn't he? Brave little journalist, scribbling his stories, and look what it got him." It killed him instead. Maria let out a strangled cry, her body shaking. Keanu caught her arm, steadying her, his gaze locked on the man. He spoke slowly, buying seconds. "You're confirming it then. Miguel Alvarez was targeted, murdered, because of what he uncovered. That's your admission." The man chuckled darkly. "Call it whatever you like. Neutralized, eliminated, silenced. The world's quieter without him." Maria's sob echoed into the night, her grief raw and uncontainable. Keanu glanced at her briefly, then gave the slightest nod a signal. In the shadows beyond the clearing, Daniel Cortez adjusted his position, waiting for the moment. High above, a faint hum broke the night air. A drone, small and nearly invisible, hovered into place. Its lens glinted as it locked onto the scene, streaming everything directly to federal servers. The leader's smirk faltered as he caught sight of it. Around him, the armed men shifted nervously, their discipline cracking. Keanu's plan was already in motion. The leader barked an order in Spanish, his voice sharp as he gestured toward the drone. 2 of the armed men raised their rifles, aiming at the sky, but the little machine zipped higher, out of range. Its red light blinked steadily, recording everything. Keanu took a slow step forward, his voice carrying steady authority. "It's too late. That drone isn't just filming for me, it's streaming live. Every word you say, every move you make, is being uploaded to federal servers. If you hurt her, if you hurt any of us, you're finished." The leader's jaw clenched, his bravado slipping. He sneered, trying to mask the flicker of unease. "You think a toy in the sky scares me?" Keanu's gaze hardened. "It doesn't need to scare you. It only needs to show the world what you are. And right now, every agency that matters is watching." Maria's heart pounded as she clutched the folder to her chest. She felt her grief boil into something fiercer, louder than fear. She shouted across the clearing, her voice trembling but fierce. You killed my husband because he wanted the truth to be heard. Now, the truth is bigger than you. It's bigger than all of you." The man's eyes narrowed at her defiance, his smirk twisting into anger. He took a step closer, snapping his fingers. One of his men yanked Isabella upright, dragging her toward the clearing. The girl's muffled cries pierced the night. Maria lunged forward, but Keanu blocked her with his arm. His voice dropped low, calm and commanding. "Wait. Trust me." Daniel Cortez moved silently in the shadows, circling behind the van. His combat-trained eyes marked every guard, every blind spot, every mistake the kidnappers made while distracted by the drone. The leader raised his voice again, trying to reclaim control. "Enough games. You give me the files now, or she dies in front of you." Keanu didn't flinch. He took another step forward, his tone steady as steel. "If you pull that trigger, you lose everything. The FBI already has copies. Killing her won't erase what's been recorded. It'll only guarantee you'll be hunted until there's nowhere left to run." The man faltered, his bluff exposed. Around him, his men exchanged uneasy glances. The power he held was slipping, and everyone could feel it. Maria's tears streamed down her face as she called out, her voice breaking but filled with resolve. "Isabella, hold on, Mama's here." For the first time, Isabella's wide eyes locked on her mother's voice. Hope flickered in them, despite the gag. Keanu glanced upward at the drone, its hum steady, then back at the kidnappers. His next words were cold, deliberate. "This ends tonight, not with more blood, but with the truth. You wanted fear. Instead, the world will see your faces, hear your threats, and know exactly who you are." The clearing pulsed with tension, a fragile balance about to snap. And in that moment, the kidnappers realized they were no longer hunters. They were prey caught in their own trap. The clearing snapped like a wire pulled too tight. One of the kidnappers, jittery and desperate, fired a shot into the air. The crack split the night, sending birds scattering from the trees. Maria screamed, clutching her chest, and Keanu instantly threw himself in front of her, shielding her with his body. Chaos erupted. The armed men who had been lurking in the shadows surged forward, rifles raised, their discipline fracturing under the sudden realization that they were exposed. The drone hummed above them, recording every frantic move. Daniel Cortez slipped into action with the precision of a soldier. From his hidden vantage point, he moved silently between the trees, his steps quick but measured. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the first man he encountered, wrenching the rifle away and striking him hard enough to send him sprawling. Before the second assailant could react, Daniel drove his shoulder into him, knocking the weapon free and silencing him with a swift strike. 2 men down, and not a sound louder than the chaos already unfolding. Keanu's eyes darted toward Isabella. She was still tied, still gagged, her small frame shaking as one of the kidnappers dragged her back toward the van. Keanu's heart thundered in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to run to her, but he couldn't, not yet. He had to keep Maria alive first. Gunfire cracked from the far side of the clearing. But instead of more kidnappers, it was sharp, controlled bursts, professional. Keanu's pulse steadied as he realized what it meant. Agent Miller had arrived. Against the kidnappers' orders, the FBI had moved in, their presence silent until now. "Go! Go!" A voice barked through the dark, and suddenly, agents in tactical gear poured from the trees. Red laser sights cut across the night, targeting the kidnappers with ruthless precision. Maria gasped, tears spilling as relief and fear collided. "They're here. Oh, thank God, they're here." Keanu grabbed her arm firmly. "Stay low. Don't move unless I tell you." He broke from cover, charging toward the van. A kidnapper raised his weapon to block him, but Keanu ducked, ramming his shoulder into the man's chest. The impact sent them both sprawling, but Keanu rolled to his feet first, grabbing the knife the man dropped. He sprinted the last stretch to Isabella. Her wide eyes met his, desperate and pleading. With quick, precise motions, Keanu cut through the ropes around her wrists, then tugged the gag free. "You're safe now," he whispered fiercely, lifting her into his arms. The girl clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder, her body trembling with shock. Keanu held her tight, his chest rising with relief. Behind him, the firefight still raged, but in his arms, Isabella was safe. He turned just in time to see Maria stumble forward, her hands covering her mouth as tears streamed down her face. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of Miguel's spirit lifting, as though his courage had carried them through to this moment. Maria ran forward, her sobs breaking into gasps as she saw Isabella in Keanu's arms. "Mi hija," she cried, reaching for her daughter. Isabella reached back, clinging to her mother with all the strength her small frame could muster. Maria wrapped her arms around both of them, her tears soaking her daughter's hair. For a fleeting moment, the world outside the chaos, the gunfire, the shouting ceased to exist. But the danger wasn't gone. The leader of the kidnappers barked orders in rage, his face twisted with fury as he realized control had slipped from his hands. "Kill them all!" he roared. The kidnappers scrambled, but the FBI agents pressed harder. Bullets ripped through branches, orders shouted through radios. Daniel Cortez emerged from the tree line, his movements controlled, his rifle now in his hands. He took down another kidnapper with 2 precise shots, then moved to shield Keanu, Maria, and Isabella. "Time to move," Daniel called, waving them toward the edge of the clearing. "We can't stay in the open." Keanu shifted Isabella into Maria's arms, his tone sharp but gentle. "Run with her. Don't look back. Cortez and I will cover you." Maria hesitated, her eyes wide with fear. "What if?" "No, what ifs?" Keanu cut her off firmly. "Go," Maria obeyed, clutching Isabella tightly as she sprinted toward the shadows where agents were pushing the line forward. Keanu and Daniel held their ground, side by side, blocking any threat that came too close. The leader spotted Maria's escape and raised his weapon, aiming for her back. Keanu saw it instantly. With a burst of speed, he charged, slamming into the man before he could fire. The two crashed to the ground, grappling fiercely. The leader's strength was brutal, his strikes sharp, but Keanu fought with something deeper rage at the men who had broken Maria's family, fury at those who thought children were pawns in their games. Daniel covered him, holding off the other assailants as the FBI closed in. Within seconds, agents swarmed the clearing, pinning the remaining kidnappers to the ground. The leader snarled beneath Keanu, but before he could reach for his weapon again, Agent Miller himself appeared, pressing a knee into the man's back and snapping handcuffs over his wrists. "It's over," Miller growled. Keanu staggered back, his chest heaving, his fists still clenched. Daniel grabbed his shoulder, steadying him. Together they watched as the kidnappers were dragged to their knees, their weapons kicked away, their power shattered. Maria stood a few yards away, holding Isabella tightly against her chest, rocking her back and forth. The girl wept into her mother's arms, whispering words only Maria could hear. Relief cascaded through Maria like sunlight breaking a storm. For the first time since Miguel's death, hope felt real again. Keanu walked to them slowly, his expression softening as he knelt beside mother and daughter. "She's safe," he whispered. "It's done." Maria looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears and gratitude. "No," she said softly, shaking her head. "It's only beginning. But tonight you gave me back my child." The fluorescent lights of the FBI field office buzzed softly overhead, a stark contrast to the chaos of the park. Maria sat in a chair at the long table, Isabella curled against her side, still trembling but safe. Keanu stood nearby, his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the folders spread across the table. Daniel Cortez lingered at the corner of the room, watchful and silent, while Agent Miller entered with a thick binder and a grim expression. Miller set the binder down and looked directly at Maria. "You deserve the truth," he said. "What happened to your husband wasn't an isolated tragedy. It was part of a larger operation, one that stretches across borders." Maria's breath caught. She held Isabella closer, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. "You mean they killed him because he was just another journalist to silence?" Miller shook his head firmly. "Not just another. Miguel Alvarez was dangerous to them because he connected dots no one else dared to touch. He found ties between the cartels in Mexico and corporations here in the United States. He had proof that money was being laundered through legitimate businesses, feeding into political campaigns, buying influence, protecting criminals. He was about to publish his findings. That's why they marked him. Maria's tears welled as she pressed her hand to her mouth. He told me he was close to something big. I begged him to stop. I thought it was only about corrupt officials in Mexico. But this... She trailed off, shaking her head in shock. It's bigger than I ever imagined. Miller opened the binder, sliding several documents toward Keanu and Maria. These files you kept in your safe. Most people would have destroyed them. But because you held on to them, we now have direct links tying cartel operations to executives in American companies. The evidence is damning. Keanu leaned over the table, scanning the documents. Names of corporations he recognized leapt off the page, alongside bank transactions and coded messages. His jaw tightened. So Miguel died for this, for proof that corruption didn't stop at the border. Miller nodded. Exactly. His work threatened powerful people who thought they were untouchable. That's why they neutralized him. And tonight, when Maria found his name in those files, the network realized their secret wasn't buried after all. They panicked. Maria's hand shook as she touched one of the papers, tracing Miguel's name written in the margins. Her voice was quiet, reverent. He wasn't just writing stories. He was holding a mirror to monsters. Keanu looked at her, his voice steady. And they killed him because they feared the truth more than anything. He paused, his eyes locked with hers. But it doesn't end with him. We'll finish what Miguel started. That's my promise to you. Maria blinked through her tears, studying his face, searching for any sign of doubt. But all she saw was conviction. Slowly, she nodded, her grip on Isabella tightening as though to draw strength from her daughter. Daniel finally spoke from the corner, his gravelly voice cutting through the quiet. If we push this forward, they won't stay silent. They'll fight back. You both need to be ready for that. Maria lifted her chin, her voice steady, despite the tremor in it. I've lived in fear for too long. If my husband gave his life for this truth, then I won't hide from it anymore. Keanu's hand rested briefly on her shoulder. Neither will I. Agent Miller tapped the binder, his voice deliberate. The Bureau will act on this, but it won't be easy. These corporations have lawyers, politicians, even judges in their pockets. They'll try to bury the evidence, just like they buried Miguel. But this time, the story is bigger than them. Maria lifted her gaze from the papers, her eyes wet but resolute. Then let it be told. Let the world know what Miguel died for. Miller studied her for a long moment, then gave a small nod of respect. You're braver than most people I've worked with. Your husband would be proud. Isabella stirred in her mother's arms, whispering, Mama, is Papa's fight over now? Maria pressed her lips to her daughter's hair, her voice breaking softly. No, mi amor, it's not over. But now we know why he fought, and we'll keep fighting for him. Keanu leaned closer, his tone carrying both comfort and iron. Isabella, your father believed truth could protect people. That's why he risked everything. And because of him, because of what your mother found tonight, many lives will be saved. He didn't die for nothing. The girl's eyes shimmered, confusion and hope mingling, and she buried her face into her mother's shoulder. Daniel folded his arms, his voice steady. So what's the next step? Miller answered immediately. We build the case, quietly, carefully. The drone footage tonight is already secured on our servers. Add that to these documents, and we've got the beginnings of something powerful. But we'll need people willing to stand up, just like Miguel did. Keanu met Maria's eyes. Then we'll stand. You, me, Isabella together. We won't let fear dictate the story anymore. Maria's tears slipped freely now, but her chin held high. For 3 years, I thought Miguel's voice was silenced. But tonight I understand it never was. It lived in his work. It lives in me. And with your help, Keanu, it will live in the world again. The room fell into a quiet stillness, heavy with purpose. Keanu closed the binder slowly, his hand lingering on the cover as if sealing a vow. Then let's make sure Miguel's sacrifice wasn't the end. Let's make it the beginning. Agent Miller gave a grim smile. That's the spirit we'll need. Because from here on out, it only gets more dangerous. But with allies like you, we just might turn the tide. Maria drew Isabella close, whispering into her ear, "Papa's light is still shining." For the first time in years, her words felt true. Keanu glanced at the mother and daughter, his heart heavy yet steady. In their faces, he saw grief, but also the resilience to carry a legacy forward. He whispered more to himself than anyone else. "We'll finish what Miguel started." And in that sterile FBI office, beneath the buzzing fluorescent lights, a broken family and an unexpected ally forged a promise that would echo far beyond the walls around them. The office was quiet again, the rush of agents fading into the background as Maria held Isabella close. Relief lingered in her trembling body, but sorrow pressed even harder now that the truth had been laid bare. Keanu watched them silently, then turned toward the safe once more. He hesitated, his hand resting against the heavy steel door, as though he knew what he was about to reveal would carry a weight of its own. When he pulled the safe open, he reached past the folders and journals. From the back, he retrieved a small velvet box, worn with age but still intact. He held it carefully, almost reverently, before carrying it to the table where Saturday, Maria, he said softly, placing it in front of her. "There's something I've been holding on to, something I never fully understood until tonight. It was with Miguel's belongings when the files were first handed to me. I thought it was just another personal item that ended up mixed with the evidence. But now, I think it was meant for you." Maria looked at the box with trembling hands, hesitant to touch it. She finally opened it, her breath catching in her throat as she gasped. Inside lay a silver locket, its surface etched with delicate swirls, identical to the one already hanging from her neck. Her own locket had never left her since Miguel gave it to her on their wedding anniversary. Her fingers shook as she lifted the new one out of the box. She opened it with care, and the moment the clasp clicked, tears spilled freely down her cheeks. Inside was a small, faded photograph of herself and Isabella, taken years earlier. Isabella was only a child in the picture, smiling wide, her arms wrapped around her mother. Miguel had carried this with him, pressed close to his heart, until the end. Maria covered her mouth, a sob breaking free. He kept us with him, even when he knew the danger, even when he faced them, he carried us. She clutched the locket tightly, her tears falling onto its surface. He never stopped loving us. Not for a single moment. Isabella leaned forward, peering at the photo, through her own teary eyes. "Papa, he had us with him all along?" Maria nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, mi amor. Even when he couldn't come home, we were still with him, always." Keanu's chest ached as he watched them. The test he had started days ago, meant only to measure honesty, now felt like something shameful, insignificant compared to the truth that had been uncovered. He had thought to protect himself, to guard his trust. Instead, he had been handed a sacred duty to carry forward the fight of a man who had given everything for truth. He spoke quietly, his eyes fixed on the locket. "This isn't just jewelry, it's his legacy. Miguel left you proof that his love never wavered, and now it's up to us to make sure his truth doesn't die either." Maria clutched the locket to her chest, her sobs quieter now, steadier, as though the tiny piece of silver had given her back strength she thought she'd lost forever. Maria's tears slowed as she held the locket close, rocking slightly with Isabella nestled against her. It was as if Miguel's presence filled the room, not in flesh but in spirit, reminding them that love and truth could never be erased. She kissed the locket, whispering softly in Spanish, words only a wife could speak to the man she lost. Keanu remained quiet, giving her space, but his gaze never wavered. The velvet box, the journals, the files, all of it told a story that had begun with suspicion and ended with a vow. He realized now that Miguel had not only fought for truth, but had left behind a family who bore the cost of his courage. Daniel Cortez stepped closer, his deep voice breaking the silence. "I saw men carry tokens like that in combat," he said, nodding toward the locket. "Things that reminded them why they fought, why they endured. For Miguel, it was you and Isabella. That's the kind of love that keeps a man steady, even in the fire." Maria lifted her gaze, her eyes red but fierce. "He died alone, but he didn't forget us. That's what this proves." She opened her palm, showing the two lockets side by side, reflections of one another. He wanted us to know that even when the world turned against him, we were his light. Keanu leaned forward, his voice low but resolute. "And now, Maria, that light belongs to you, to carry, to protect." Miguel's truth lives in these files, but his love lives in you. Together, they form something unbreakable. That's why I swear to you, I won't treat this as just another case. It's a sacred duty. Maria blinked at him, her tears glistening. "You would do that for us? Even now? After everything?" "Yes," Keanu said without hesitation. "Because no one should stand alone against the kind of power that stole Miguel's life. He fought without backup. We won't make that mistake again. You have me, you have Cortez, you have the Bureau. His sacrifice will not vanish into silence." Isabella raised her head, her voice small but steady. "Papa was brave. I want to be brave like him." Maria hugged her daughter tightly, her voice trembling with pride. "You already are, mi amor." The room settled into a deep stillness, heavy but no longer hopeless. The locket gleamed softly in Maria's hand, a symbol of the past and a promise for the future. Keanu glanced at the safe, remembering how this all began what he thought would be a simple test of honesty. But it had become something far greater, a turning point that tied his life to theirs. As Maria closed the locket and placed it around her daughter's neck, her tears finally gave way to a fragile smile. "Miguel carried us with him," she whispered. "Now we'll carry him forward." Keanu's eyes softened, and he nodded once. "And I'll be with you, every step of the way." The FBI office emptied slowly as agents wrapped up reports and evidence collection. The adrenaline of the night was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. Maria sat at the table with Isabella leaning against her, both clutching the silver locket that now hung from the girl's neck. Keanu remained nearby, silent but thoughtful, his eyes fixed on the files stacked neatly in front of him. Finally, he spoke. "Maria, I've been thinking. Miguel gave his life for truth, and tonight we saw how dangerous it is for people who dare to speak out. But what if his fight didn't just end with exposing corruption? What if it became the start of something bigger?" Maria looked up, her eyes tired. "What do you mean?" Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady but passionate. "I'm talking about a foundation. Something in Miguel's name. Not just a memorial, but a living force that helps families like yours, families who lose someone, to the fight for truth. Journalists' wives, children, parents. They're left alone, vulnerable, silenced. A foundation could protect them, support them, and keep their voices alive when their loved ones are gone." Maria blinked, the idea too large to grasp in the moment. "A foundation? Keanu, I'm just a maid. I clean houses to keep my daughter safe. I don't have the strength or the resources for something like that." He shook his head firmly. "That's not true. You've shown more strength tonight than most people show in a lifetime. You faced the men who killed your husband. You refused to be silenced, and you stood for Isabella when fear could have broken you. That's strength, Maria. And you wouldn't be alone. I have resources. People I trust. The FBI can provide guidance. Together, we could build this into something real." Her tears brimmed again as she shook her head. "But what if I fail? What if I can't carry this burden?" Before Keanu could answer, Isabella stirred. She sat up, wiping her face with her small hands. Her voice was soft but filled with determination. "Mama, Papa wanted the truth. He wanted people to know what was really happening. If we start this foundation, it means we're helping him finish what he started. Isn't that what he would want?" Maria's breath caught, She looked down at her daughter, seeing Miguel's fire in her eyes. For a moment, she saw not just the frightened child who had been rescued hours ago, but a spark of the journalist's legacy shining in the next generation. Keanu's voice dropped to a gentle tone. Listen to her, Maria. Sometimes the strength we doubt in ourselves is the very thing our children already see in us. This isn't just about Miguel anymore. It's about building something that says no matter how dark the world gets, the truth won't die. Maria pressed her hand to her locket, torn between fear and hope. Slowly, she nodded. If we do this, if we create this foundation, then it won't just be Miguel's fight anymore. It will be ours. Keanu allowed himself a small smile. Exactly. The Alvarez Foundation for Justice. Born out of sacrifice, carried by love, and built for the truth. Maria's hand lingered on the locket, as though drawing courage from its silver weight. The Alvarez Foundation for Justice, she whispered, testing the name on her lips. It felt strange, yet powerful, an idea born out of pain, but laced with purpose. She looked at Keanu, her voice unsteady. But how do we even begin? I wouldn't know the first step. Keanu leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. That's why you won't be doing this alone. I can fund the startup, get legal advisors, and connect you with people who understand nonprofit work. More importantly, I can call in favors. There are journalists, advocates, and even veterans who've seen too much silence. They'll want to help. Maria's brow furrowed. And the FBI? Will they support something like this? Agent Miller, still nearby, answered before Keanu could. The Bureau can't fund private efforts, but we can guide you. Families of whistleblowers and journalists often fall through the cracks. A foundation like this could make a real difference. If you build it, we'll back you in ways that count. Maria exhaled slowly, her heart heavy, yet alive with a new spark. Isabella tugged on her sleeve, her young voice filled with conviction. Mama, Papa always told me truth was like light. Even if someone tries to hide it, it finds a way to shine. This foundation could be our light. It could be his light. Maria pulled her daughter close, kissing her hair. For the first time since Miguel's death, she felt the possibility of healing through action, not silence. She turned back to Keanu, her eyes shining with gratitude. If we do this, it must honor Miguel's heart, not just his fight. It must help the families who feel forgotten. Keanu nodded. That's exactly the vision. A safe haven for those left behind. Scholarships for children. Legal aid for widows. A platform to protect journalists still in danger. We won't just preserve Miguel's legacy, we'll amplify it. Daniel Cortez stepped forward, his voice firm. And you'll need protection too. A cause like this will make enemies, but I've seen enough tonight to know I'll stand with you. You can count on me. Maria looked between the three men, Keanu, Miller, and Cortez, then at her daughter. The fear still lingered in her chest, but it no longer ruled her. Instead, resolve rose where despair once lived. She lifted her chin, her voice steady. Then let's do it. For Miguel, for every family like ours. The Alvarez Foundation for Justice begins tonight. Keanu's eyes softened with pride. Then we build it together. Maria clasped Isabella's hand, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight of her grief ease. Miguel had been silenced, but his truth had not. It lived now in them, and, soon, it would live in the world. The auditorium was filled with restless energy, the kind that comes before a storm of words. Reporters crowded into rows, their cameras aimed at the podium. Bright lights glared down, ready to capture every movement, every syllable. For weeks, rumors had swirled that Keanu Reeves was connected to a whistleblower case, but no one expected what was about to unfold. Backstage, Maria gripped the edges of her chair, her body trembling. Isabella sat beside her, her small hand squeezed firmly around her mother's. Keanu stood nearby, his calm presence steadying them both. He wore a simple black suit, his face solemn but resolute. Maria's voice quivered. Keanu, I don't think I can do this. Speaking to all those people, telling Miguel's story. What if I fail him? Keanu crouched beside her, his tone gentle but firm. Maria, you've already faced men with guns. kidnappers who threatened your daughter, and the truth about Miguel's death, standing at a microphone is nothing compared to that. You're not failing him, you're honoring him, and the world needs to hear it from you." Isabella leaned closer, her young eyes fierce with determination. "Mama, Papa wanted people to know the truth. If you speak, you're doing what he couldn't finish." Maria inhaled shakily, tears brimming, but resolve growing in her chest. She nodded slowly, clutching the silver locket that now hung around her daughter's neck. The event organizer signaled. It was time. Keanu led them onto the stage, his tall frame drawing every camera's focus. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, flashes exploding as journalists raised their microphones. He stepped to the podium, letting the room quiet before he spoke. "Good afternoon," Keanu began, his voice carrying across the hall. "You know me as an actor, but today I stand before you not as a celebrity, but as a witness to a story bigger than myself. A story of sacrifice, truth, and courage." He turned slightly, gesturing to Maria and Isabella, who stood just behind him. "This is Maria Alvarez and her daughter, Isabella. Many of you may have known Maria as someone who worked quietly in my home, but she is not here as my employee. She is here as the widow of a fallen hero, and Isabella is here as his daughter." Gasps and murmurs swept the room, cameras flashing faster now. Keanu's voice grew stronger. Her husband, Miguel Alvarez, was a journalist in Mexico. He uncovered evidence of corruption linking cartel money to powerful corporations, even here in the United States. For that, he was targeted and murdered. His death was written off as an accident, but the truth is clear. He was silenced for daring to speak. Maria's breath hitched, but Keanu gave her an encouraging glance. He stepped back, allowing her space at the podium. For a moment she froze, her hands trembling as she gripped the wooden edge. Then she remembered Miguel's locket. The photo inside, the way he carried their memory to his last breath. Her voice broke at first, but she pushed forward. "My husband died for the truth. For years, I thought his fight ended with his death. But tonight I stand here, with my daughter, because that truth has not died. Today, with Mr. Reeves's help, we carry it forward." The flashes became a blinding storm. Maria's tears shimmered under the lights, but her voice grew steadier with every word. Maria steadied herself at the podium, her hands trembling, but her voice finding strength. "For years, I was silent. I cleaned houses, raised my daughter, and tried to keep us safe by hiding from the past, but hiding never brought peace. Miguel's killers wanted us to vanish into fear. Instead, we are here in the open, carrying his truth to the world." The room hushed. Even the photographers lowered their cameras, sensing the gravity of her words. Maria's eyes glistened as she continued. "Miguel believed that truth was light. He told me once that even in the darkest night, light finds a way. Tonight, I know he was right. His voice was stolen, but his message still lives." She placed her hand gently on Isabella's shoulder. The girl, though nervous, lifted her chin and whispered into the microphone, her young voice piercing the silence. "My papa was brave. Now we have to be brave too." The simplicity of the words struck the audience harder than any speech could. Reporters exchanged glances, some wiping their eyes. Keanu stepped forward, his voice calm but resonant. "This is why we're creating the Alvarez Foundation for Justice. It will provide aid to families of journalists who have been silenced, give scholarships to their children, and ensure that no one who risks their life for truth is forgotten." The announcement rippled through the crowd. Questions erupted. Which corporations are involved? What evidence do you have? Will there be indictments? But Keanu raised a hand for silence. "All of that will come in time," he said. "The files are with the FBI. Investigations are underway. But today is not about corporations or indictments. Today is about a man who gave everything for truth, and a family who deserves to see that sacrifice honored. Today is about Miguel Alvarez." Maria closed her eyes briefly, the sound of her husband's name spoken aloud to the world filling her with both grief and pride. She whispered, barely audible but strong, "Gracias, Miguel." The cameras resumed flashing, but this time the images captured were not of a broken widow, but of a mother, standing tall with her daughter, flanked by an ally who had turned his own platform into a shield for them. The story of Miguel Alvarez was no longer hidden in files or whispered in grief. It was alive, blazing in headlines, spreading beyond the auditorium. As the press conference ended, Maria stepped back from the podium, her chest heaving with emotion. Keanu placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it," he murmured. "The world knows now." She looked at him through tears and managed a fragile smile. "No, Keanu, we did it. For Miguel, for the truth." The sun hung low over the hills of Mexico, casting golden light across the small town that had once been Miguel's home. Streets that used to carry whispers of fear now buzzed with anticipation. Children in uniforms clustered together, parents lined the walkways, and a banner stretched proudly across the new schoolyard, Escuela Miguel Alvarez, for truth and learning. Maria stepped out of the car slowly, her breath catching as her eyes fell on the building. Fresh paint gleamed white under the sunlight, accented by blue trim around the windows. The school stood like a symbol, a promise that the silence of the past would not erase Miguel's voice. Isabella's hand clutched her mother's tightly. She wore a simple dress, her locket resting against her chest. Though her eyes held the memory of fear, they also shone with new courage. She whispered, "Mama, look." They put Papa's name on the wall. Maria followed her daughter's gaze. Etched in stone above the entrance were the words, "In honor of Miguel Alvarez, a champion of truth." Tears blurred her vision, but she smiled through them. "He would never have believed it, mi amor, but today the world remembers." Keanu stood a few steps behind, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his demeanor humble. He didn't seek the cameras or the applause. He simply watched, hands folded in front of him, as Maria and Isabella took their place at the heart of the moment. For him, this wasn't his story, it was theirs. He was here to honor, to support, to witness healing where once there was only pain. As the crowd quieted, a local official stepped forward, speaking warmly about Miguel's legacy. He spoke of the articles Miguel had written, the risks he had taken, the truth he had chased even when it placed a target on his back. He told the gathered families that this school would serve as both an education for children and a reminder that courage is stronger than fear. Maria listened, her heart full yet heavy. When the microphone was offered to her, she hesitated. Her hands trembled as she stepped forward, Isabella by her side. The crowd waited, respectful and patient. She clutched the locket at her throat and began to speak. "My husband, Miguel Alvarez, gave his life for truth. For years, I thought his sacrifice was buried in silence, forgotten by the world. But today, seeing his name on this school, I know that was never true. His light continues through all of you, through every child who will walk these halls and learn that truth is worth fighting for." Her voice broke, but she continued, steadier now. "This building is not just stone and paint. It is Miguel's voice carried forward. And for my daughter, for your children, it is proof that even in death, courage can build something new." The crowd erupted in applause, many wiping their own tears. Maria turned and laid a bouquet of white lilies on the steps of the school, her hands lingering on the flowers as though laying them at Miguel's grave. As Maria stepped back from the flowers, Isabella moved forward on her own. The little girl stood at the foot of the steps, her small hands clasped in front of her. The crowd hushed again, curious. Isabella's voice trembled at first, but grew louder as she spoke. "My papa believed truth could save people. He was not afraid, even when others told him to stop. Tonight, I want to say I'm not afraid either. Someday, I will become a lawyer. I will protect families like mine, so no one has to lose what I lost." Her declaration struck the crowd like a spark. Applause thundered, some people cheering, others calling out encouragement in Spanish. Maria covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes brimming with pride. She had always worried that her daughter would be crushed by the weight of loss, but now she saw strength, Miguel's strength growing in her. Keanu watched quietly, his throat tight. He had stood on many stages in his life, under brighter lights and louder applause, but none of it compared to this moment. A child vowing to carry forward the torch her father left behind. For the first time, Keanu felt that the test he had set for Maria months ago had come full circle. What began as doubt in another's honesty had become his own sacred duty to honor truth, even when the cost was high. After the ceremony, townspeople approached Maria with embraces, words of sympathy, and gratitude. Some admitted they had once been afraid to speak Miguel's name. Now they vowed to tell his story openly. Maria wept with them, her grief no longer lonely but shared. As the crowd began to disperse, Maria stood with Keanu and Isabella in front of the school. The golden light of dusk painted the walls behind them, making Miguel's name glow against the stone. Maria turned to Keanu, her voice low but full of emotion. "I never thought I would come back here. I was too afraid. But today, I feel peace. For the first time, peace." Keanu gave a small nod, his gaze steady. "That's because Miguel isn't just gone. He's here in this school, in Isabella, in you. His truth lives on." Maria reached for his hand, squeezing it with quiet gratitude. "You kept your promise. You carried us when I thought we couldn't go on. I will never forget that." Keanu's voice softened. "It was never just my promise. It was Miguel's too. I only helped you find the strength you already had." Isabella slipped her hand into both of theirs, her eyes bright with determination. "Then we'll carry him together, always." The three of them stood in silence as the last rays of sun sank behind the hills. The town, once muted by fear, now echoed with hope. And though grief would always live in Maria's heart, it no longer chained her. It had become something new, a foundation, a legacy, a flame that could never be extinguished. The quiet of Keanu's home felt different now. It was no longer just a refuge for him, but a place where the threads of one man's sacrifice, one woman's resilience, and one child's courage had been woven together. On his desk, beside the closed safe, his journal lay open, waiting. He picked up his pen, pausing for a long moment before writing. A test of honesty opened the door to truth. What began as doubt ended as hope. Miguel Alvarez died, but his legacy lives in Maria, Isabella, and every family we will protect. The words filled the page, slowly, carefully, as though each one carried the weight of everything they had endured. He sat back for a moment, reflecting on how far they had come. A simple test, a decision to leave the safe open, had unearthed a buried world of corruption, danger, and grief. But it had also given him something more purpose. He turned his gaze to the safe across the room. Its door was shut now, not as a barrier, but as a vault. Inside rested the journals, the files, the locket's empty velvet box. No longer a trap, the safe had become a symbol of protection, a place to hold the weight of sacrifice and love. In the living room, Maria and Isabella sat together on the couch, the glow of the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Maria looked calmer than she had in years, her grief still present but softened by the hope she now carried. Isabella leaned against her mother, her locket glinting in the light, her small fingers tracing its edges with quiet pride. Keanu joined them, lowering himself into the chair opposite. For a moment, none of them spoke. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was filled with a sense of belonging. Maria broke it first, her voice quiet but steady. "I used to think I was just a widow, just a maid who had lost everything. But now I know Miguel left me more than grief. He left me a purpose." Isabella smiled faintly, her young voice carrying unexpected strength. "And he left me a dream. Someday, I'll make sure other children don't lose their parents to fear." Keanu listened, his heart tightening at their words. He had lived a life of fame, wealth, and public scrutiny. Yet in this small family story, he found something more meaningful than any role he had ever played. He leaned forward, his voice low but firm. Miguel's story is no longer just his. It belongs to you, to Isabella, and to every person we'll help through the foundation. And it belongs to me too. Not by blood, but by choice. You're not alone anymore. Maria's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not only tears of grief, they were tears of gratitude, of healing. You've given us back more than I thought possible. You've given us hope. Keanu nodded softly. And you've reminded me that hope is worth protecting, no matter the cost. The three of them sat together as the light shifted, not as strangers bound by tragedy, but as something new, a family forged by loss, courage, and justice. As evening settled, Keanu rose and returned to his journal. He added one last line beneath the words already written. We cannot change the past, but we can carry its truth forward. Miguel's sacrifice is no longer buried, it is a beacon. He closed the journal gently, placing it atop the safe. The act felt final, not like shutting a door, but like preserving something sacred. When his hand left the cover, he knew it wasn't just Miguel's story inside those pages. It was Maria's, Isabella's, and now his own. In the living room, Maria stroked her daughter's hair, her gaze lingering on the future more than the past. Isabella had dozed off against her shoulder, still clutching the locket. Maria whispered softly, For years, I prayed for peace. I never imagined it would come through people I barely knew, people who chose to stand with us. Keanu stepped back into the room, his expression calm but reflective. Sometimes family isn't just the one we're born into. Sometimes it's the one forged in the fire of what we survive together. Maria looked up at him, her voice trembling with quiet certainty. Then, you're part of our family now. Miguel would have wanted that. For a long moment, Keanu said nothing. He simply nodded, humbled by her words. It was not glory or recognition he sought. It was the simple truth that he had kept his promise, not just to protect, but to honor a man who had given everything for justice. He looked once more at Isabella, sleeping peacefully, and then at Maria, whose strength now radiated through the cracks of her grief. They were no longer victims of a crime buried in silence. They were carriers of a legacy that would not die. Keanu's thoughts returned to the night the safe had been left open. What he once believed was a test of honesty had become something far greater. A lesson that truth, even when painful, holds the power to heal and unite. He took a deep breath and let the reflection settle before speaking his final words of the night. Miguel lives through both of you, and through every family the foundation will protect, will finish what he started. Maria closed her eyes, holding Isabella close. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to believe those words fully. Miguel's light had not been extinguished, it had only changed form. The three of them sat together as the last of the day's light faded, bound not by the chains of sorrow, but by the strength of shared resolve. And so the story ended not with silence, but with a call to those listening. Would you risk everything for the truth, even if it cost you the person you loved most? Tell us in the comments below.